All eyes are on the Chiefs draft plans. What comes first and what has to get done today on Locked On Chiefs?
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Welcome back, friends and neighbors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, you new users are getting $200 back on a $5 win. Right now at FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Go there to get started. We're going to get started as we kick into high gear for the NFL draft. It is coming. A lot of the film is done. We are wrapping it up on Rogue APC. We'll have the draft guide for you, the whole 9 yards. The last pro days happen tomorrow. We're almost done there. So we're going to run down for you. What's the priority? What's the free agent moves that can be done? And what could throw an offense versus defense kind of wrinkle into it? We're joined today, obviously. Thank you for being here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Make sure you like, sub, and hit the bell here on YouTube. Join us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts because we're free on every platform every day, all the time. And you can get just that much more on the Insider text line at 816-357-8781. He's Chris Clark, the owner of Chiefs Corner, going to run down all the metrics you need for the financial side, the business side, the cap, the quarterbacks, contracts extraordinaire, stuff that just makes my head spin. I'm Ryan Tracy, the founder of Rogue Analytics and Performance Consulting, the home of the Athletic Matrix and the Rogue APC Draft Guide. Coming hot and heavy here. Going to have it out as soon as we possibly can. You can get a little discount if you go over there to rogueapc.com and use the code LOC to get yourself a little bit off there. Going to get into that as well as on NFL33.com and RGR Football. But today we got to start in prioritizing or maybe reprioritizing the NFL draft. And for me, it's 1-2. It has been all offseason. Do you have to prioritize the tackles? You have to prioritize the wide receivers, getting in weapons. We had a mock draft yesterday that took into account this drama that's going on with Rashee Rice, who I believe has retained counsel, and we don't have anything really much more than that. At least I don't. So I'm still in the same mode that I was yesterday. Is maybe wide receiver has overtaken the tackle need. Where are you at?
Man, I will say it's hard because I'm not so sure that wide receiver wasn't already above offensive tackle. I think you could make an argument that before the Rashee Rice thing, it was already above offensive tackle. When you start looking at the tackle situation, they have somebody that they feel like did probably a good job, and there's still technically options out there that you could possibly go sign as a free agent. Donovan Smith, you could still bring back for another year. Yes, it's just a stopgap. It gets you just one more year down the road. But between him and Wanya Morris, I think you could feel okay at left tackle. Is it going to be great? No. Is it going to be okay? I think you have to feel like it could be okay. The big question then still actually, and I know it's not tackle, but what happens with Joe Thuney? Is he able to get through the season with his injury? That kind of does play into the whole left tackle thing in the situation you want to put your left tackle in, because having him next to Joe Thuney is going to be a huge boon if Thuney can play and he can stay healthy the entire season. That pec injury that could cause some issues, and hopefully there's no reoccurrence. But so you're sitting there, and at left tackles, I still think a huge position of need. But you look at the wide receiver room, and they don't have the ability to separate. Hollywood Brown brings a different element than what they've had. Rashee Rice gave them more yak yardage and was able to move the sticks, especially after the catch. But we'll have to see how they're going to attack this offseason, because they still have kind of the same wide receiver room to an extent. Obviously, I think Hollywood Brown's an upgrade from MBS, but I still think you still need more help there. And I still think it's a big help.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that as we plan out and we go through more mock scenarios, it's because of what I see as this fact. The top, say, 5-6 tackles, the top 2 tiers, are all going to go in the first round. I can make an argument that there is a 3-man top tier on the wide receiver side, and then there's a pretty good girth of the second tier that is going to fall a little bit into the second round. So if tackle is the priority, it's looking more and more like you either have to live with the concept of you're going up to get a tier 2, because I don't think you can get to tier 1 tackle, or you have to be comfortable with taking a tier 3 or 4. Well, yeah, I know.
You can.
There are possibilities there, but you have to live with the fact that you're either going up to get somebody, or you have to be comfortable with tier 3, 4 at 64. Those seem to be the two things.
Right. And here's the key to me. And here's where I think Brett Veach has to make his decision. And this is really where what it comes down to for me is that you have to figure. Obviously, you can't plan for everything. You couldn't plan for the Rashee Rice incident, so we have no idea how that's going to affect things. We still don't. We don't really have any updates on that yet. But you can't plan for everything that's going to happen. But you can look at where you're sitting and figure that you're probably going to be drafting somewhere between 25 and 32 for the foreseeable future. So if you want to attack at the positions, the huge positions that you look at, the premium positions in the NFL, which are quarterback, left tackle, used to be corner and defensive end, you're going to probably have to trade up if you want to go get a marquee talent. That's the only way you're going to be able to do it. And now I think you can add wide receiver into that realm. So that's why I'm not opposed to trading up for a wide receiver. But you're kind of probably right. It's a different tier than what you're looking at if you were able to get up to 7 or 8 where we got with, Freaky Friday mock draft. Mm-hmm. That's a different tier of wide receiver than you're going to be able to get at, even 20 or 22. So, I mean, the big question is are you willing to, in best case scenario, in my mind, you trade up earlier into the first round and you trade up earlier in the second round and you get a tackle and you get a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds and you go with what you got. And I think you're going to have to trade up to go get a tackle and try to get a top tier tackle. There are people saying that there could be 8, maybe even 10 offensive linemen that go in the first round, which would be nuts considering some of the other positions in this class.
It makes sense though, because there's two classes of teams in this league right now. You either have a franchise quarterback or you're scrambling for one. And if you do have one, you got to protect him. And that makes sense to me. The question becomes is not just what comes first on the offensive side, but the defense has needs too. And where do they intersect? We're going to get to that coming up next on the Locked On Podcast Network.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you read a book? Would you go for a walk? Would you maybe watch a little football? I know it's not football season, but you can have some tape games. What would it be that you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. There's lots of different things that you can use therapy for. Finding what you want to be spending your extra time on could be one of them. The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find out what matters so you can do more of it. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com/lockedon. BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
The Locked On Sports Today feed is what you want if you want 24/7 coverage, not just this team or the NFL, but all the major sports stories going on. Get it here on YouTube or on Amazon Fire at Locked On Sports Today. Today looks a little bit different than yesterday did, just like every other day we go through this draft process. And it's starting to creep in as well. We talk so much about the 2 positions that we just finished talking about that I think somewhere we get lost in the fact that there is a possibility that another talent, a higher graded player, could pop up into one of these scenarios in between, say, 22 and 64, whatever the Chiefs moves around and whatever selections they have. They include players like Brendan Fisk, the defensive tackle. They include players like Rakeshaw, corners that might stand out, that might fall a little bit, to put themselves into consideration, because for Brett Veach, there's drafting for the players that are available at your positions of need, and there's drafting best player available. And I think the lines get blurred here in this situation. I don't think they have to go out and draft a corner to replace L'Jarius Sneed. That's why they have the pipeline in place. But I know they'd like to. I don't know that you have to go get a defensive tackle that you feel can penetrate gaps and rush the passer, because you signed nearly your entire defensive line group back. We're going to talk about the one omission coming in that later in the show. I know you don't have to do that, but you'd probably like to. So the question becomes, when does that become the priority for you?
I will say this. if you go back and look at the last couple of seasons, it's usually been defense that they've been spending a lot of their big picks on. And I think that that's a scenario where look at what it brought from the defense last year. And I think you could make an argument that, you look at another interior guy like another, obviously he's not going to be Chris Jones, but I'm going to say a Chris Jones-esque type defensive tackle, which is what you'd be looking for in the first or second round. If you can get that kind of guy that can give you penetration in the interior of the pocket, that really opens up a lot of things for your defense that you just aren't going to get elsewhere. So I get the thought process of going that direction. I get the thought process of taking a defensive tackle. I struggle with them thinking that with the thought that they would think about taking a corner, considering they just took Trent McDuffie a couple of years ago, and they seem to develop corners very well. I know there's some guys that are probably going to drop in this class just because of how strong the other position groups are. Maybe Kansas City takes advantage. Maybe they take a corner. But I think you have to focus on trying to give Patrick Mahomes whatever he needs. I think your defense is still going to be very good and still probably going to be close to a top 10 unit, even without L'Jarius Sneed on it, because you pretty much have the entire defense back other than Sneed. And yes, Sneed is a fantastic player, and it's going to be a loss. But I think they have players that can step up and be close to 70 to 80% of what he was. And I think if you get another guy in your interior that can rush the passer, if you bring a guy back, like what we're going to talk about next segment, that can get after the passer and break inside at times and rush from the interior as well, maybe you're in a situation where your defense can still be top 10. And if you hit the offense on the other and you hit on that pick, you're going to be in a situation where it's going to be hard to beat you.
I hope so. And I can live with that. I personally feel like I agree with you that the expenditure and draft picks in particular on the defensive side has been paramount as of late. And I think now it's got to swing back the other way. So I'm okay waiting till the third round. And certainly the top of day 3 is all defense to me. Filling in some of those gaps, developmental type players. So I don't have to have that. I'm trying to figure out if in lieu of that, if you're not going to use it, say, in the third round, do you double dip? Do you double dip at wide receiver in particular? Because that's where I would say is probably the most likely thing to happen if you go all offense on day 1 and 2.
Wide receiver, I could see offensive guard. Interior of the offensive line, tight end is another one. I mean, there's several different positions you could go. And I want to be clear here. I don't know the draft like you do. I'm not going to try to sit here and say that. So it's possible there won't be that type of talent that you want to take at that level. But that's my thought, is that when you're looking at that position, you're looking at offensive tackle, you're looking at wide receiver. If you get those in the first 2 picks, I still think you can go wide receiver again. I think you could go tight end. I think you can go offensive guard. There's not really many positions other than maybe running back that I couldn't see this team going. I don't see them double dipping I guess I should say, I don't see them double dipping at offensive tackle either, but because I don't think they need to. But I do think that they could double dip at wide receiver. Tight end's another option. And as I said, offensive guard, because Trey Smith is going to be a free agent next year. I think Joe Tooney is a free agent the year after that, or maybe it's next year. I'd have to go look. Yeah, so you have to go look at, the availability there. And right now, you probably also are trying to go find somebody on the interior that can snap, because you don't have anybody right now to back up Creed Humphrey. I'm not saying you draft a center. I'm saying you have a guy that can step in and play any of those 3 positions.
You're putting a damper on my plan, and so is the rest of the NFL, unfortunately, because my guy, Pooney from Kansas, is a guy that can play all 5 positions and is learning a snap that he did at the Senior Bowl, and he's getting rave reviews. And unfortunately, the league seems to be blowing him up. I don't think he's going to be there at 95 anymore. So that was kind of the guard in the back of my pocket. I got a couple of guys that I like on day 3.
He just wanted them to go get a KU guy. I know how it is.
When there's an opportunity he's worth the pick, yes, I want him to go get a KU guy. We got Tigers on here. Do we have any K-Staters? I don't know that we do.
Yes, FAU.
What am I thinking? Of course, FAU. We got Boomer Sooners. I mean, come on, let's get a little bit more blue and red, okay? That's all I'm saying. He's worth it, and I think he's proving that.
KU players or fullbacks, Ryan's going to be all in.
Oh, and if I could get a KU fullback, I mean, Casey, come on. Let's get this done.
Okay. We need to move on. We need to stop that nonsense. I think Andy Reid's done with the fullback in Kansas City. But actually, really quick, something we haven't talked about, and this actually may play into what Kansas City decides to do at some of these draft picks, is the new kickoff rules are going to change how teams are going to play against kickoffs. And you look at, they just signed a guy from, now I can't think of the sport, rugby.
Wales.
To play running back. Huh?
Wales.
Yeah. And
it's a country within a country.
Well, okay. We will see if he's actually able to play, if he's actually able to make the team. I'm not saying he's going to, but my point is special teams availability, special teams, what you need on special teams is going to change because gunners used to be so important to cover kickoffs. You're not going to have kickoffs the same way anymore.
Right.
It's a different scenario. Maybe you're going to see more tight ends. Maybe you're going to see more, different positions on the 53.
CB5 and WR6. Little bit more testy to make this roster. We're going to get into who might be able to do that in the form of a free agent or two, or how they should go about it. They do have some money to spend. Free agent moves coming up next here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I know your sports calendar is loaded. Mine is as well. Whether it's the NCAA tournament, whether it's kids sports, whether it's this draft cycle that is just another grind altogether, it is absolutely full, and you can make it more exciting by getting in the action. Right now, new customers are getting $200 back on their first bet if it wins on a $5 bet. Super simple. It's $200 back in bonus bets to your account if your first $5 bet wins. You can use it on the tournament. MLB, NBA, hockey is coming on strong right now, especially if you're in the fantasy playoffs like I am. FanDuel.com/lockedon is the spot to go to make your first bet a big win at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Go check out Locked On Sports today. Check out Chiefs Corner. Check out NFL 33 and Rogue APC to get all the information. Free agency is where I was going, but it looks like you might have something else that you need to hammer me with. Is it non-KU, please?
Yes, it is non-KU. I just want to say the L'Jarius Sneed trade finally did hit the transaction report. Kansas City should have close to $26.4 million in cap space, which is going to lead us into the conversation you want to have right now. So I thought it was something that we should talk about, or at least
Absolutely.
mention.
I appreciate you hitting that because, I think part of the holdup has been the physical. Even the Titans kind of hinted at, hey, it's taking a while for this transaction to clear all the hurdles. It finally does. Maybe that's been the holdup because I think right now the guy that's sitting out there that is a Chiefs free agent that I think they need to return and they haven't yet. Number one top priority for me is Mike Dana because I think that rounds out and takes away a need in the draft that we just talked about. You don't have to go out and spend a top 100 pick on a defensive tackle, an interior player specifically, if you bring back Mike Dana, in my opinion. A, do you agree with that? And B, do you think the team does?
I'll be honest with you. If there's not a tackle there, there's not a wide receiver there, and I'm going to add this to it as well. If there's not a guard there, and I know that sounds crazy to say maybe, but to me, that position guard, what Nick Alberti brought to this team is so big. I think that that's a position that they definitely need to focus on. If there's the talent there that they think is worth the pick, you need to take him and fill the positions elsewhere. Because I do think that really helps Mahomes try to make sure that interior stays as strong as you possibly can. What I would say, though, is, Sweat from Texas, I mean, if he falls to 64 and he's sitting there at 64, I think you have to give a long, good, hard look at picking him, even if you are foregoing getting a tackle or a wide receiver. If he's your highest rated guy, I think you have to take him, even if you do sign a guy like Mike Dana. I like Mike Dana, and I think that he could be great in this defense. I think he can help. And you said defensive tackle, which is interesting because everybody looks at him as defensive end, but I know why you said it, because he can break down inside and he can play interior and exterior, and that really helps with the ability to be, play multiple positions. To me, though, I still think that if that defensive tackle is there and you think that it's somebody that can give you somebody next to Chris Jones, like a Chris Jones-esque type player, I think you have to go get him. And I really, putting Sweat next to Jones, good luck, because that's going to create a whole bunch of problems for offensive lines in the NFL. And that only helps your corners. which is, I think, one of the reasons why they let Snead go is because they think that they're strong enough inside. They can get interior pass rush. They can get pass rush on the QB so their corners don't have to hold up as long and don't have to be as shut down as they were with Snead.
I can see that. And certainly Charles Menahue and Chris Jones agree with you. Get Sweat.
Yes, they do.
Sweat puts up about an average, and I knew you were going to bring this up, so I looked it up. Sweat puts in about an average of 33 snaps a game in college. I don't know that that's enough for me to warrant 64. 95, sure, definitely below that. So I don't know if the Chiefs can go make that happen. Maybe Chris is in Veach's ear right now, for all I know, making that happen. But if not, I think they have contingency moves. And the reason that I bring up Mike Dana is because he feels that need, but he also lets you wait until day 3. And the Chiefs have been connected at pro days through this circuit with a number of day 3 prospects. Most notably for me is Lovett from Florida State, because they understand what Florida State does. That's where Noddy played. They understand the concepts, right? The interesting thing about Lovett, who is not the athlete that Byron Murphy is, or honestly that Mike Dana is, but he's got one thing. He's got good size, he's got good anchor, and he's got 36.25-inch arms. It's just one of those things that, especially against guards, you feel that he can mangle dudes, and that might be a day 3 sleeper that sets them up to not have to spend a top 100 pick on the D-line.
Yeah, and maybe I'm a little higher on Sweat. Maybe a little bit. But
no, you're Chris.
Well, no, I get that. But I guess what I'm saying, the way I look at it is, and this is the way I look at Kansas City's picks just about every single year, because this is where they're always picking. They're always picking between 30 and 32, it seems, and that's just going to be the way it is. And if that's really going to be the case from here on out, you have to realize you're going to be picking third-round guys. I mean, you can try to be picking the guy that you think has your best grade in the third round, but you're not getting a second-rounder more than likely. Now, maybe in some of the lower rounds, you'll get a guy that you think should be like a fifth-round guy, because people take guys that they don't think have the value that you do. I mean, it's just, to me, I think that you're going to be picking somebody that has a third-round value on your board at 64. I don't think you're going to get somebody that has a second-round value at 64. And if you think that's what's your guy and somebody wants to trade, maybe you trade back, 5-10 picks and still get him. I don't know. I mean, I'd be okay with that too. I just think you have to look at it, and it's really going to be interesting to see how the board breaks down, because you have this run on offensive tackles early. You have this run on wide receivers early. That's going to push other players down, and you're not in the market for a QB. You're not really in the market. You could take a corner, but you're not really in the market for a corner. So all the premium positions, defensive end is, I guess, something you could look at, but you've invested a ton there, so I don't think you'd really be wanting to look at that either. So your choices are going to be limited to different positions when you get down to where they're going to be picking in the second and third rounds.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'm just taking a quick spin here through what's available at running back, because that's the other position I think that they probably have a priority on in day 3 that maybe would take the place of a second wide receiver. My favorite right now is Jake Kong from Arizona, that I think you could get on day 3 and add another weapon into the offense. But do they have to spend a better draft pick than 7th on a running back in this group? Jerick McKinnon is still sitting out there. We all know that they love him. Will you be back? I don't know. I think Cam Akers is a risk, but could be a free agent signing. Now they have a little bit of cap space. There's options.
Is McKinnon even going to be wanting to come back? I mean, he went through an injury last year that was pretty significant. And from what I saw reported afterwards, it didn't even look like he really should have even been playing in that game. But it was because of the fact that they were playing the 49ers that he did.
And that's fair. I mean, so maybe he isn't an option. It's a little bit thin, but there are a couple of options out there that are still in their 20s. J.K. Dobbins has a serious knee injury. Cam Akers has come off of one too. But I think both of those guys could be interesting.
Could you imagine bringing J.K. Dobbins in and giving him a highly incentive-laden deal?
Sure.
If he can play a full season, what could that turn out to be?
Yeah. I mean, it could be 30-40% of the snaps, right? Because I don't think you're going to go away from Pacheco. Other guys like, say, Josh Kelly that are still out there in free agency should be very cheap and would be second fiddles. But I think if you do that again, it sets you one less thing that you feel you have to do on draft weekend. And I think that goes a long way. So let us know what you guys think. What are the priorities? What do you want to see them do? And what has to be done before that to let your plan come together? like Hannibal says. So put your comments here on YouTube. You can leave us the iTunes reviews. You can hit us at the Locked On Chiefs account on Twitter even. We would very much appreciate it. And we appreciate you guys spending your time with us. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Get into the audio platforms on Spotify, on Apple podcasts, and all the free platforms, because we're free every single day, 5 days a week. Plus, and as soon as we have information that needs to break, we do it on the text line at 816-357-8781. Tomorrow, Derek joins me. We're going to go over his take and what's going on right now. Thanks for being